Hey, welcome to Radicalize Me. I saw R.M. Brown talk about this Reggie Watts interview on the Joe Rogan show, and oh man, I was listening to RM in the car, and I was just screaming as this was happening because, you know, Reggie Watts, God love him. He seems fine to me. I think he's making an effort to understand things, but he doesn't really have the information and the background. And then Joe Rogan is Joe Rogan about it. And the problems with this conversation really got me thinking, and I think there's a lot to learn here. So let's take a little look here at what Reggie Watts says about capitalism.
Gross generalization, but I think like pretty much every conflict is a result of capitalism. Raw capitalism, like in its nascent form, is like it's just a system of trade and so forth.
So that, I think, he's actually not too much on the wrong track here. Like, that's sort of true, but you're just talking about trade, which is not necessarily capitalism. Trade and commerce predate capitalism for sure.
The way it's been wired, because it doesn't have human well-being involved in the equation, it's just about, can we make this graph go up? Like, we need more of these numbers, and it's just chasing infinite wealth, right? It's like
Right.
Wealth amassing, but so it has a value system, but human well-being's not in it.
All right, and this is like not a bad point. I really I agree fully with this. The only thing missing is kind of the class analysis. It's sort of in there, like floating around somewhere, but this like human need conversation is good. It's important within socialism, but he's just kind of missing the class aspect and how who owns the means of production, dictates whose needs are met.
So eventually, over time, it's like, of course, people are going to game it, and very few people are going to game it, and they're going to acquire all this stuff, and they're just going to be like desensitized to the rest of the inequities and so forth, and then you're going to cause all this animosity, and then there's going to be a lot of people going like, well, I need to get my stuff back, and then you get all these opportunists that are using the disgruntleism and like using that to arm.
It's being a little vague here. I just love the term disgruntleism. I'm going to start saying that. I'm a Marxist-Leninist disgruntlist. I'm an anarcho disgruntlist. Let's keep going.
That's my gross oversimplification. I'm sure I'll be corrected millions of times over. But whenever I see any of these conflicts, or even a conflict in my own neighborhood or my neighbors arguing over, it's about a property line, or it's about you didn't do this or you didn't do that. It's this weird thought process that goes into, I don't have enough, or I have all the stuff and I want to keep the stuff, or I want more stuff.
This is a little off the trail here because he's talking about personal property, right? Like, yeah, it does get a little silly sometimes when people are like, no, the property line is at the fucking the brook here. And it's like, no, it's here at the trees. Like, sure, it's a little silly. That's not really capitalism. It's kind of just people's plot of land, which is not necessarily anathema to socialism. People want to have their own space sometimes, and that's okay. And I think even Cuba, when the socialists were in charge, in Austria and created the Viennese public housing system, it's like, yeah, I mean, people want their own space, and that's okay.
I'm not phrasing it as eloquently as I usually do on ketamine, but
Relatable.
Whenever I see all of these things, I'm just like, I have a feeling that it's probably maybe that. I don't know.
The problem is the alternative is even more horrific.
What's the alternative? You mean
Socialism.
socialism. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know enough about
Because the only
that.
way that's enforced is by dictators.
Okay, so, at least with Reggie Watts, and this is why I, walk away with a little more respect for him after this conversation, is that he bows out. He's like, I don't know enough about that. He's maybe new to thinking this way. I don't know. But it seems like the way he's talking about it, he's like, yeah, I'm just starting to think that maybe this is the problem. But then when you actually get into, okay, what's the alternative? It's socialism. What does that even mean? How do you do it? Which version is good or bad? What is even true about what you've been told about it? And he's just like, I don't know enough. You should do that, and then you should go and read about something immediately if you find that you're out of your depth. But Joe Rogan is about to talk out of his ass. He talks here about how the only way to enforce socialism is through a dictator, which is not true. Socialist countries have usually sophisticated and complex political systems that really, in a lot of cases, especially like you can find this in Cuba pretty easily, there's a lot more participation by the greater population than we have in America. And I just, there's this idea that, well, first of all, they do have a president in Cuba. They vote for a president who has certain number of terms, and then they vote for a new president. So like there is that. But no, Americans have this idea that like if you don't change out the fucking figurehead, head of state, every 4 years, then it's fucking tyranny. Meanwhile, Donald Rumsfeld is in the government for 40 years, and it's like, okay, great. I'm glad that Reagan or Bush or the other Bush or fucking Trump like didn't get to stay president forever, but fucking Rumsfeld was there the whole time. Not with Trump, but like he was there for a really long time through all of those guys. Nixon too. And it's just a little ridiculous when it's like, oh, Castro has too much power. Okay, well, who has power in the U.S.? There's a lot of unelected positions that wield a whole lot of power and get to stay in office for way longer than presidents and Congress people at least have to go through the motions of an election.
And then the dictators wind up doing what every human being in power does, which is control all the resources, control all the wealth, live in extravagant houses while everybody starves.
Also not true.
Because the only way to enforce socialism is through violence.
This is the most important dumb thing. He says the only way to enforce socialism is through violence. I'm sorry. Is capitalism enforced through fucking handshakes and pats on the back? Like, what the fuck are you talking about, man? We have a global system of imperialism. Like, what the fuck are you saying? It's like, how is capitalism enforced in Bangladesh? Huh? How's capitalism going in Somalia or fucking Guatemala? Like, what are you fucking saying? This is so stupid, man. Anyone who steps out of line, even here in the U.S., police will beat the shit out of you. We've done coups or attempted coups everywhere that there's been any leadership that's gone a little too far to the left. You nationalize your oil, not nationalize your fruit plantations. Well, you're going to get Allende. You're going to have the first 9/11 happen to you in 1973. Or in the more accumulationist era of capitalist imperialism, say 100 years ago to 120, 130 years ago, what was the U.S. doing? We were taking over places that weren't even a threat to us. We just wanted their shit. And, the Philippines, Hawaii, Cuba, it's just a violent rampage of imperialist extraction. Go look at it's fun to go on Google Maps sometimes and look at zoom in on some of these West African countries where there's like one road leading from a mine to a port. What's that about? How did that happen? Why is it that whole fucking nations exist to move copper out of the area. Capitalism is violence. It is purely violence. It always has been. You can trace it back to stuff like the British East India Company, colonization of places like North and South America and the Caribbean and India and Ireland. All these places where the British or the French or the US set up shop, like take over, do a coup if you have to, put in a leader that is more amenable to you, who will send death squads after workers who try to unionize, that kind of thing. And it's just extraction. And you don't think direct violence is done to these people if they try to turn on us? Fucking, you ever heard about the Irish potato famine? Well, as Sinead O'Connor said, we got to talk about the famine and the fact that there never really was one. The Irish were only allowed to eat potatoes. So when the potato crops were fucked, there was no other food because all the food was just being moved out of Ireland into England. That's how this fucking works. And so when guys like Joe Rogan, who, I think it's safe to say Joe Rogan has amassed a lot of wealth, but not really as a capitalist, because he earned money as a stand-up comic, as an actor, then as the host of Fear Factor, and now basically as a podcaster. He's just kind of working for himself. He doesn't really have too many employees or anything. I get, Jamie, I guess. He's got to pay the pull that up fee. So like the way he became rich is not like the most evil. It's not the most horrible, but when you get this rich, you're so fucking out of touch. And what happens is guys like Joe Rogan are just scared of socialism because they're scared that at some point, if they're not down with any aspect of what, even a single aspect of what's happening, the gun might be turned on him. That's not a threat. I'm not out to do that. I'm not suggesting it or encouraging it. I'm just saying, yeah, when socialism is implemented, that's not very popular with capitalists and rich people because they don't want to give up all the amenities and all the comfort and all the boo that they have, all the excess that they have. They don't want to just live well and have others live well so that we all can. He's just scared that, again, the violence might go the other way if the rich guys aren't on board. There's violence happening every day to the rest of us.
The only way to take people's resources and evenly distribute it, you have to go in with guns.
But what about like countries like Sweden and things like that? They have we have social.
So problem here is that, again, and Reggie Watts admitted, he just doesn't know enough about this. But that's the problem, is that like the guys who get their voices elevated to talk about this shit on a public forum are like this. It's rich guys like Joe Rogan, and it's I don't know how rich Reggie Watts is, but like he lives like this goofy like successful comedian life that like he just gets to like sit around and think of this shit and then go on Joe Rogan and be like, I don't know, like let's spitball socialism. This is what you hear. You don't get experts brought in, right? When was the last time Joe Rogan had Noam Chomsky on the show? When was it? When did he have Michael Parenti or Matt Christman or Amber Frost from Chapo? Any of these people who have actually done the reading, who have actually studied it. It's just this bullshit. My point is Reggie has no rebuttal to this point about like, well, socialism requires violence, unlike everything else. Like they were just talking about war before this fucking segment. Anyway, yeah, so Reggie doesn't have anything to say to that, and then he goes, oh, what about Sweden? Which is like, Okay. Sweden's not socialist, especially like compared to its neighbors. Sweden's probably one of the more right-wing ones out of like Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, Netherlands, that whole like Scandinavian area. So yeah, no, this is a bad example because again, you don't think that the government uses the monopoly of violence in Sweden? Why? What makes you fucking think that? What, are they special? Are they different? It's ridiculous.
We should have
systems.
social systems.
Yeah, socialist systems. But you're talking about like full on socialism. Yeah, I mean, I'm not, that's why here's something that's interesting. I really think within our lifetimes, if it hasn't happened already, governments are going to start using AI to do low-level legislation. And now I'm summarizing in a very optimistic way.
We've been talking about this a lot, actually.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah. Good. So I got a friend of mine, Dr. Alan D. Thompson. If you don't know about him, just check him out. He's an AI expert, researcher. He's an explainer. He has a thing called The Memo that comes out, I think like every 2 weeks, something like that. But it gives you a really holistic state of the union of AI. And he's hyper optimistic and calls it human evolution, which I believe in that as well. If it's used well, you get rid of the emotional factor and you just have something that's looking to solve problems.
Yeah.
And so I think like it can at least give you 5 solutions that are non-emotionally based, that are just addressed, that are supposed to kind of maximize the positive probable outcome. And I think we may see a human AI synergistic government, at least low-level government implementation. Probably some country that's like can do that and not feel like they're betting the farm on it.
And if it goes well, then other people will implement it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is so stupid, man. The problem with government is not at all. Like you've got to get this in your head. The problem with government, with countries, with leadership, is not that people are too emotional, and it's not that we just can't think of the right good ideas. We just need some unemotional computer intelligence to tell us the good ideas, and then we do them. No, dude, society is a mass of fucking competing interests. Okay? That's why Republicans do the worst imaginable thing every time, right? It's not because they're emotional. It's not because they're stupid and they can't think of good ideas. It's because that serves their donors. It serves their own personal interests. They deregulate industries that they then go into out when they're out of office, and they can, cheat more and do more scams and make more money in that fucking industry. That's how this works. Then, Democrats are not shying away from being more aggressive on implementing good ideas when it comes to expanding healthcare and funding public education, well, like whatever the fuck thing that we want them to do, and sometimes they'll do a tweak on it. It's not because they're stupid. It's not because they can't think of good ideas. It's because they serve the same donors, the same capitalist interests. Okay, that's the difference between socialism and capitalism. It's a dictatorship of the bourgeoisie or a dictatorship of the proletariat. And again, it doesn't matter how you fucking dress up the government, right? We have 2 houses of Congress, and we have a judiciary, and we have an executive head that we fucking switch out every 4 years. So that means it's a democracy. Democracy is rule by the people. A famous Princeton study found that the will of the majority of Americans has little to no bearing on what the government actually does and what the government decides. But when Exxon wants something, when fucking Raytheon wants something, but these fucking shithole countries like Cuba and China and talk to people who lived in the former USSR, but over in Russia and Eastern Europe, and a lot of them will say things were better under the Soviet Union. A lot of Chinese will say, we love our government. They give us what we need in most cases. Cuba will say the same thing. They get to participate and be part of some of the decisions even that affect their lives. And that's a massive difference. That creates a government of the people that serves the people. It's not perfect. Nothing is. But that's the fucking difference. It's not because we don't have a fucking computer to tell us the right ideas.
Yeah, I think so. We were talking about a AI president.
Yeah.
That you need a president that is immune to bias,
Yes.
corruption, influence, and someone who just looks at things rationally and in an intelligent way that spans all the disciplines, right? Like, how could any president really be an expert in foreign policy, the environment, economics?
Yeah, they can't, and they don't claim to be. That's not how being the president fucking works. They have a shit ton of advisors. They have all the government agencies that handle different things like education and the environment and transportation and all of this. So again, no, it's not that we don't have a fucking science fiction computer. It's not because we don't have data from Star Trek as the fucking president, you idiot.
How
No.
could one person really know the correct solutions to all those issues?
Okay, so it's like, all right, well, what do we have a dictatorship here? Is that what you're saying? It's one guy in charge. That's what you say about the socialist countries. It's not true there. And now you're saying it about America. Oh, it's one guy expected to fucking know everything and make all the decisions. That's not how it works. You fucking dunce, dude. President Biden is not a creation of Joe Biden's. It is an amalgamation of this man and his career, right? He came to the Senate 50 years ago. He was there until he became vice president, and then he was out of the government for Trump's presidency, and now he's the president. But what happened along the way? Senators have to be elected every 6 years. He had a campaign team. He had volunteers and field organizers who knocked on doors and made phone calls and sent emails and did all this stuff to get him elected. There are lobbying groups and activists and all these people who have tried to influence what he does, and it all culminates in President Biden. There he is. We have a president. It's not just one guy, and that's the same reason it's not true about these other countries. Fidel Castro didn't just by himself take some guns and go fucking oust Batista and take over the country and say, I am the dictator and you all do what I say. And then that had worked for fucking 50 years. That's ridiculous. It's baby talk silliness, as Michael Parenti would say. And it makes no fucking sense. They had a whole guerrilla army. They had activists and just movements of the people that were in support of the 26th of July movement. It's never just there's one guy and what he says goes. It just doesn't work that way.
The influence of corporations on
Yes.
even well-intentioned, people that go into government, they're like, I want to make a difference. I want to make
Yep.
change. It just gets in there. It's
gotta play
so
ball.
baked. It's baked in there. And
baked
so some of my friends are like, well, if you do like universal basic income, which I think is something I'm kind of interested in. I think that is interesting. If you can account for where that comes from in a way that doesn't upset people that have a lot of power and a lot of money, feel like.
So yeah, he almost gets at it here where he's recognizing that, like, yeah, even people who have good intentions are influenced by all these different forces, different interests when they get into government. And then at the end there, he's saying, well, oh yeah, we got to find some way to do this that doesn't upset like the powerful people with all the money above it. It's like, so how are you going to do that? How the fuck do you do that? Tell me, like, what the fuck are you talking about? That's why you need to get rid of those people. That's why you need to remake society into a system that has no room for these big money corporate interests. Thanks for watching. I hope that made sense. This just pissed me off. But yeah, thank you again, and please like, comment, and subscribe. We do have a Patreon, patreon.com/radicalizeme, and just keep being awesome. I'll see you next time. Bye now.